During the past 3 months, I have tested a bunch of thermal cameras for bird watching and animal spotting. And in this video, I will review the AGM Fuzion model. I will show you my experiences with it and how it works and my overall opinion, as well as comparison with other similar products. And by the way, if you like what you see in this video and if you decide to buy this product, make sure to check the latest price as well as the best discount code in the description of the video. But without wasting any more time, let's dive right into it. Now, before I dive deeper into the details of this product, let me actually show you how easy it is to use for the first time. So first you need to insert one of the batteries into the charger and then charge up the battery. Then after the battery is full, you need to insert the battery into the device like this. Then just remove the lens cover, power up the device, and you're good to go. And if the view is blurry, use the focus ring until the text on the screen is clearly visible to you. And to focus the camera to a particular distance, use the diopter ring. But now, the most important thing is for me to show to you how this product works in my hands and what kinds of results I have seen with it and how it compares to these other AGM products. First and foremost, the Fuzion model is not just a standalone camera. There is an app you can download to both iOS and Android that allows you to connect your thermal camera to your mobile device for a live view. And this is something I wanted to mention right off the bat because this makes it so handy to use the product. So instead of having to learn all these on-device controls, you can just connect it to your application or to your mobile device rather and use it via the app where you can control over all these settings such as the brightness, contrast, thermal palettes and whatnot. Now let me show you how easy it is to turn on this functionality and to start to use the camera through your app or through your mobile device. So first you need to power up the device, then you need to hold the menu button to see the menu, then you need to scroll down to see the network function, then you need to tap the menu button again to activate it. If the hotspot is on, there is a hotspot icon at the top right corner of the view of the device. Then just open up your Wi-Fi settings on your mobile device and connect to a Wi-Fi that looks like this. And the password is the last 9 digits of the serial number of your device. In other words, it is those 9 last digits in the Wi-Fi name for your convenience. Then open up the T-Vision app, sign in and start a live view. And now you can control your camera with your mobile device handily. Then let me show you these thermal palettes that come built into this device. In Fuzion, there are 6 different thermal views or thermal palettes that you can use to watch objects. And this is actually different to, for instance, the Taipan model and the Sidewinder model that I have tested because those only had 4 different palettes. And by the way, switching between these modes is very easy, so you can just watch through your device and tap on the menu button to change the thermal palette. But now that I have mentioned these palettes, let me actually show you what those look like and what those mean in the first place. So here is the Fuzion mode. Fuzion mode is practical because it adds color to see temperature changes. This helps spot details and patterns. It also blends visible details with thermal data to help you see objects better than black and white images. Then you have the red hot mode. This mode highlights the hottest areas in red, making it easy to spot heat sources. It's good for detecting high temperature objects in complex scenes or focusing on hottest points. Then there is a very similar white hot mode. The white hot mode shows hot areas in white and cool areas in black. It's an easy way to spot temperature differences in dark or low visibility conditions. By the way, this is the mode that I use most often when spotting birds and animals. Then there's the black hot mode. This is the opposite of the white hot mode. It reduces glare, making heat sources easier to spot against dark backgrounds. It's often preferred by hunters and law enforcement. And then there is the optical mode. The optical mode shows a regular visible light image captured by the camera. This helps you observe fine details like textures, colors, and structures. This is different from the earlier Fusion mode, combining thermal and visible light for enhanced visibility. Then last but not least, there is the Image Fusion mode, which is not the same as the Fusion mode. This combines both optical and thermal images into a single view. The Fusion overlays the thermal data on top of the visible light image. You can simultaneously identify heat sources and see the surrounding environment's details. This is especially useful for applications requiring context, such as inspecting buildings, wildlife observation, or search and rescue operations. Then let's talk about the basic adjustments in the Fusion thermal camera. So there are lots of built-in settings and tweaks that you can do, but I'm not going to go through all of them here because I just want to demonstrate the very basic use case, and the use case I have found practical when I have spotted birds for the past 3 months with it. First and foremost, to make these adjustments, you need to open up the menu of the device. And as I already showed you earlier, you can do this by tapping the menu icon and holding it down for a couple of seconds, like 2 or 3 seconds. Then there's the operations wheel that you can scroll in either direction to scroll through these menu elements. Now here are the most important adjustments and settings I find myself tweaking all the time when I'm using this product. So the first one is the contrast. To tweak the contrast, open up the menu and navigate to the contrast icon. Then tap the menu button shortly to adjust the contrast level. It is a one-way slider that goes from 1 to 10 and then resets back to 1. Here you can see some of the images that I have taken with different contrast settings in the same spot. So here's an image with contrast set at 1. Then here is an image that has the contrast level set at 5. And then last but not least, here is the contrast at 10. As you can see, changing the contrast level allows you to spot details better in different conditions. It is a very similar thing to adding contrast to traditional images. Then another super important setting to tweak every time is the brightness. Very similarly to how you can control the contrast, you can control the brightness by opening up the menu, navigating to the brightness icon, and then tapping the menu button to tweak the brightness level. And in a very similar way to contrast, this slider also goes from 1 to 10 and resets back to 1, so it's a one-way slider as well. And just to show you how big a difference it actually makes with different brightness settings, here's an image where the brightness is set at 1, here's an image where the brightness is 5, and here's an image where the brightness is 10. Depending on the amount of light and radiation, you must tweak these settings to maximize the visibility of the objects. For instance, usually I spot owls at night time and I like to keep the brightness very low. So usually it's like 2 or 3 for me, but this depends on your use case. So just an example, here's an image of an owl that I spotted where the brightness level is 5. Here's the same owl with the brightness level 10, and here's the owl at a contrast level of 1, and here's the same owl with a contrast level of 10. And as you can see, the images look quite different. So this will allow you to capture a wider spectrum because, as I've said before, it is hard to identify birds with a thermal camera. But with these different contrast options and these different brightness options, as well as the palettes, you can get like different angles or different views of the object, which can allow you to determine the species or the category of an animal that you have in the image. Also, if you use the black hot thermal mode, you actually need to use a higher brightness level because the meaning of brightness is inverted in the black hot mode. So if I, for instance, spot a bird and I want to identify it, I might turn on the black hot mode with the menu button, and then I might change the brightness level up to 10. So don't just play with the thermal palettes that I mentioned before, but remember to tweak the contrast and brightness settings every time. Then let's talk about recording. So the Fusion thermal camera allows you to not only take images, but you can also record videos. To take an image, there is a camera icon and a camera button on top of the device. If you want to take an image, just tap it quickly. You should see a message that says capture succeeded. And by the way, one thing that I have noticed is that when you take images, if you're just holding the device in your hand, those images might end up being a bit shaky. So you can alleviate this issue by using a tripod. Alternatively, you can take your images by holding your mobile device that is connected to the camera. And to record a video, you need to press the menu button and the camera button at the same time. When you look through the view, on the top right corner, you should see a timer going on, which indicates that it's recording. And to stop the recording, press menu and the capture button again. And then let's talk about zooming the camera. So to zoom, all you need to do is roll the operations wheel. And the default zoom is actually set at 3.5x. So you can't go broader or lower than that. So the default view is going to be very narrow and a very small area. And the maximum zoom is 8 times that, which actually means 28 times a default view. But if I'm brutally honest, I don't find the zoom feature that useful because it's not adding any details to the image similar to binoculars would. So all it's really doing is making the image larger, which also pixelates it, and it never helps me, for instance, identify the birds or see any other details that I wouldn't be able to see with the default zoom. So I never use the zoom, to be honest. Then let's talk about exporting videos and images to your computer. So within the Fuzion thermal camera package, you will receive this USB cord that you can connect your device to a computer with. As a Mac user, however, I had to buy a separate adapter because it doesn't support the USB cable that I received. Then just power up your device, make sure that the hotspot function is off, and then connect it to your computer. And once you do that, you will see a folder or a disk called Untitled. Inside of it, you will find a DCIM folder. And there you will find these time-stamped folders which contain all your videos and images from different dates that you have taken those. Then you can just drag and drop these images, for instance, to a separate folder on your computer. Then let's talk about my experience with Fuzion thermal camera. So as I said before, I use this camera for bird watching mainly. This is nice because it gives me a third eye in the nighttime. That is crucial here in Finland because we only have days that last like 7 hours or even less than that during the winter times. And overall, I love these thermal palettes as well as all these adjustments that will basically give me thousands or tens of thousands of combinations to view these birds and other objects such as animals. And based on what I've seen, you can actually spot birds from a very far distance. So I would say that 500 meters easily, perhaps even up to 1000 meters if you're lucky and if the bird is big enough. And that translates to something like 1500 to 3000 feet. But to my surprise, it is not only useful for nighttime, but it's actually useful for daytime as well, because some of these birds tend to camouflage into the background very effectively. And finding those with binoculars or even by a naked eye is basically impossible, even if you're staring directly at the bird. But on a thermal camera such as the Fuzion, these birds will be a bright spot in the view. So be it night or day, I love this product. But now, I have to be honest here, so I think that there is an even better camera offered by the same company, and that is called the AGM Sidewinder. And by the way, you can find a separate review. I have left a link to it in the description. So the Sidewinder at the time of making this video costs about $3,000, so it's definitely a pricey product, but it is the best and it is clearly better than the Fuzion model, for example. So if I had to give it a grade, I would say that the Fuzion model is like 7 out of 10 and the Sidewinder is like 9 out of 10. So you can see clearly further, and you can also see objects at a far distance with a much higher definition. And also you can identify some birds with the Sidewinder product, which is not really possible with the Fuzion unless you're very close to the birds. Now let me do a little technical assessment about the features and thermal imaging capabilities of the Fuzion thermal camera. So first, let's talk about the detection range. This camera resolution is really good for even longer distances. I can easily spot birds up to 500 to even 1000 meters away from me. And this translates to 1500 to 3000 feet. Of course, if I spot bigger animals, the distance will be even longer. For instance, here you see an image where some ducks are flying about 300 meters away from me. And as I hinted before, it is not really that easy for me to tell which kind of a bird this is. So I can define, or I can basically see the main category, that is, it is a diving duck, for example, but I can't really tell which subcategory it belongs to. So the type of bird is unknown if you're just using a thermal camera. And that's why I always carry binoculars with me, so that will tell me what exactly the bird is that I'm seeing with the camera. So the workflow is simple. I usually spot the birds with a thermal camera, and then I quickly grab my binoculars and then I identify the bird with them. Then let's talk about the field of view. My Fuzion has a narrow field of view, or FOV, of 7.5 degrees times 5.7 degrees. This means it focuses on a smaller area for more detailed views of distant targets. It is less ideal for scanning wide areas, but great for spotting and zooming in on heat signatures and longer ranges. And as I mentioned before, the default zoom is set at 3.5x the default field of view. So you can't go broader than that, you can't really go lower than that in the zoom settings. But then if you think about it, it is a thermal camera and the whole point of it is to spot objects at a distance. But now let me show you what this field of view means in practice. So here you see an image that I took with my iPhone camera. And here is an image that I took from the exact same spot in the exact same direction with my Fuzion thermal camera. In the iPhone image, you can see that the house out there is just a white spot, and you probably couldn't even tell that there is a house. But with the Fuzion image, you can clearly see the house. And this represents the default zoom level of the Fuzion camera. And just to further illustrate what this means, here's an overlay where you can see the iPhone image, and on top of that you will see the Fuzion image of the same spot. So the area that it captures is so much smaller than what you can see by a naked eye, or for instance by using a traditional camera. Then let's talk about the refresh rate. The higher the camera refresh rate, the smoother the image, especially if you're looking at or filming moving objects. The AGM Fuzion refresh rate is 50 Hz. This is twice as good as the AGM Taipan model that I have reviewed in the past. In my use case, however, I don't really pay attention to this, so I didn't really know that, okay, this Fuzion model has twice as good of a frame rate as the Taipan model. But that's probably mainly because I watch these stationary objects such as owls, and I rarely take a look at those flying birds or moving objects in the first place. And yes, the 50 Hz refresh rate can be useful if you're doing panning, and for instance if you're doing slow-mos on your moving objects. Then there is the temperature sensitivity. In these thermal cameras we have a number called NETD, which stands for Noise Equivalent Temperature Differential. The lower the value, the higher the sensitivity. In other words, if the value is low, the device can spot smaller and smaller temperature differences clearly. In the Fuzion model, the NETD value is 35 millikelvin, or MK for short. Basically, this means that the device is able to show you temperature differences as low as 0.035 degrees in Celsius. And basically this means that if you spot a bird or an animal at a shorter distance, you can see these characteristic temperature differences based on, for instance, the feather thickness much more easily, which can help you identify the species. Then we have the recording options. So as I showed you before, you can take images and videos with your camera, and you can later on export these to your computers in a very handy and simple way. Then we have the palette options that I also showed earlier. So in this device we have 6 different palettes, but I don't think that you need all of those. So when I go out there and spot birds or animals, I mainly use the white hot mode. I also sometimes use the red hot mode, and when I want to identify a bird that is sitting close to me, I might turn on the black hot mode. Then we have the battery life, which in this device is up to 7 hours. And I haven't really used this device for that long without charging, so I can't really verify if this number is correct. But at least I can tell you that when I was using this 2 hours straight in a cold weather, I only lost 1 out of the 3 bars of charge. So this makes me believe that this number is probably close to what it is in reality. And then let's talk about the build and the portability of this device. So as a bird watcher, I carry all sorts of things with me, such as binoculars, telescope, and a bag of snacks. And as you can imagine, I don't want to add anything heavy to this. So this is why I love the Fuzion model, because it is a very lightweight and a compact device that you can almost fit into your pocket. It only weighs 505 grams, which is half a kilogram or 1.11 pounds. So it's a lot smaller than the heavier things that I carry along with me. Then we have the connectivity. So Fuzion Camera connects to a mobile app that you can download for iOS and Android, and it is very handy because you don't need to learn all these on-device controls, but you can just use the app and watch through your mobile device and do all these settings and adjustments there as well. Now, every thermal camera has its pros and cons, and in this section I will talk about those, and let's start with the pros of the Fuzion thermal scope. So my absolute favorite pro of this device is the fact that it gives me this third eye during the nighttime. But it's not only that, because you can also use it during the daytime to spot these well camouflaged animals and birds in the ground. And I also love that this is a lightweight, compact device that I can carry with me without basically even noticing with the heavy telescope and binoculars. And then I love the app connectivity, so you can connect the device to your mobile device. And this is not only useful if you don't want to learn how to use the on-device controls, but it's also useful if you want to get an instant access to the footage. So for instance, if I spot an owl or something like that, I turn on the camera Wi-Fi hotspot, I connect my device to it, and I start a screen recording on my mobile device. So this way I will capture the live view and I can save it directly to my mobile device's camera roll before I go, for example, here to the office to export all these files and then again export those to my mobile device. So this will give you an instant access to the footage that you have captured. And then there are overall way more options to tweak the view and the thermal images than I anticipated. So you have the 6 palettes, and then you have the brightness and contrast settings that will give you thousands of combinations to view these different animals and birds. Then let's talk about the cons of the Fuzion camera. So the biggest issue I have is that it burns the image when you tilt it upwards. And this is something that applies to every single thermal camera out there because it is a law of nature. So when you look at the sky is very cold. So there's basically no warmth coming down from there because space is a vacuum. And if you have even a cold object in the image at the same time, it is going to shine bright. And for instance, here in Finland, when I watch these treetops, those might be -10 degrees Celsius, so they are freezingly cold, but they are still shining bright like very warm objects in the thermal camera view because the sky is so much colder then it basically disturbs or tricks the camera to think that this tree is a hot object. But yeah, I don't even really know if it's a con because this is something you can't really avoid and this applies to every single thermal camera out there. Then one of the biggest letdowns with this device, in a very similar fashion to all these other AGM products that I've tested, is that the zooming function doesn't really work. So yes, you can zoom in quite a bit, but it's only going to make the image appear larger. It is not adding any details, or at least that's how it feels. So I haven't really found any use of the zoom function. It doesn't help me identify the type of a bird I see there by one bit. And then speaking of identifying birds, with Fuzion, it is very hard to tell which bird there is. So you can tell the main type, for example, if it's an owl or an eagle or a smaller bird, but you can't really tell the subspecies or the subcategory. And it doesn't even really help if you look at it at a shorter distance. So what I do and what you need to do as well is grab your camera, find the bird with it, and then take your binoculars and identify the bird with those. And then as the last thing to mention is that the Sidewinder model is much better than the Fuzion model. So the Fuzion costs about 1,500 euros at the time of making this video, and the Sidewinder is roughly double that. But the quality, the image sharpness, everything is so much smoother in the Sidewinder model that I have fallen in love with it, and I'm really not using these other two models that I possess right now because the Sidewinder is so good. So if you can afford it, I would highly recommend you buying the Sidewinder directly instead of the Fuzion model. But that's it for today's video. I hope to see you in the next one.